And can you make me a co-host?
Yes. Hi, everyone. We're just going to give everyone a few more minutes to come on into the webinar. Thank you for joining us today. All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Technology Tuesdays. Welcome back, I should say. My name is Lydia Nimke, and I'm very excited to bring you this fall's Technology Tuesdays. I will let you all know that your microphones and cameras are turned off by default, but please don't let that stop you from engaging in the chat or asking questions through the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. With us in the background, we actually have Beth Gabriel.
Hello, everybody. Great to be back for Technology Tuesdays. I'll be helping Lydia answer the questions by sending them to her. Use that Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Beth. This presentation is also being recorded, so there's no need to take any really extensive notes. On Thursday, I'll send out an email with a link to a recording for everyone who's registered and everybody who's in attendance, so you can review it at your leisure. Yeah, so let's get started with internet safety. I'm going to turn my camera off so you can see the whole screen. So today we're going to be talking about internet safety, and I thought it was really important to kind of cover these general concepts before we take a dive into Social Media September. The truth of it is using the internet does come with some inherent risks, and it is typically the user's responsibility to mitigate those whenever possible. Of course, internet safety is a huge topic, and I'm only going to be covering the things I feel like most of my library patrons could easily do. But there are certainly options above and beyond what I'll talk about today. So feel free to do whatever you're doing to stay safe. I'm just going to talk about kind of the base level. Pretty much, so that everyone starts on this same page, we're going to talk about staying safe online, how to protect your privacy, and how that plays into online tracking. And of course, if you've attended any of the previous Tech Tuesdays, you know I'm a big proponent for making sure you're running the most updated software that you can, because it takes a lot of the guesswork out of internet safety, in my opinion. Let's break it down first by talking about staying safe online. So one of the easiest ways to stay safe online is through the tool you use to access the internet. Most modern internet browsers have a host of security features that you can use to help you stay safe online. The first and easiest thing you can do to ensure you're visiting a reputable site is to check the web address or URL of the site you're visiting before you input any personal information. Bad actors looking to steal that information sometimes make fake websites that look exactly like the real one on the home page and the login screen. And it's only after you put your login information in that visitors will realize that something isn't right there. There can be a big difference in where you end up if you transpose a pair of letters or misspell the name of the company whose website you're trying to access. So just quickly make sure you've spelled everything right and you're going to the right place, especially before doing things like paying bills or logging into online banking. Next, users can always check the security symbol, which is this lock right here. And if you click the in the address bar, you'll be able to see this command that is before all web addresses. And you want to make sure that it says HTTPS. HTTPS. The S is the important part here. That stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. So that is a secure link that you're receiving the information, the data that composes the website from. When you click on this lock here in your web browser, you'll be able to see that the connection to the site is secure. Actually, let's go ahead and see how that actually looks on a real web browser. So we're here on MPL's homepage. As you can see, once I click on the URL here, that HTTPS has come up. I know it's real small, probably hard to see. And we're going to click on this lock here to see some more information. So I can see my connection to MPL is secure. My information is private when it's sent to this site. Perfect. That's what I want to see. We want our information to be secure when we're on the internet, as secure as possible. Another good indicator of visiting a secure site is looking at the security certificate here. So let's click on that. Now we can see the security certificate is issued to mpl.org. That's perfect. That's exactly the type of stuff we want to see. And it is valid the date I'm accessing it. Absolutely perfect. So generally, at least one of those pieces will be missing when you're visiting a site that is on the suspect end of things. If you have any questions about the validity of a site, if it's owned by the people who say they're owning it, those are great places to check. All right. Now, since such a big aid in staying safe online comes from the power of your web browser, it would only make sense to make sure that your browser is updated regularly. Of course, many browser updates are issued specifically to combat these pretty common problems of identity theft, phishing attacks, viruses, and the whole host of malware. So this is very important to stay on top of to keep your computer and information safe. And finally, you should be wary of those unsafe website warnings. When your browser, gives them to you, it, wants you to stay safe while you're using their service to browse the internet. Unless you know for a fact that the website you're trying to visit is secure, I would try either retyping the URL or looking for another site that has similar information. And I have a couple examples of those unsafe website warnings for you. You'll notice a couple of things that they're gonna have in common, a couple of running themes in these warnings. One of them is this warning sign, the exclamation point inside of the triangle, as well as the color red. Those can be kind of quick indicators to you that you might be going somewhere that is unsafe, or that you want to take a step back and reassess where you're going and what you're doing. It also says, your connection is not private. Attackers might try to steal your information, etc., and so on. And you can just click to go back to safety and reassess. Here's another one. I think this one is from Microsoft Edge. And again, we're going to see that bright red color, the warning sign. And it says attackers may trick you into doing something dangerous like installing software or revealing your personal information. So again, we can just go back to safety. There is a way to bypass this if you, again, know for a fact that, you're not going to be downloading any software or entering any personal information into the website. You can bypass it by clicking this details or this advanced button here and, clicking continue onto site, but use extreme caution when you do. And then finally, this is just what it looks like when a website is not secure. So instead of having the lock like mpl.org had, we have the lock with a red line through it. And it states that the connection is not secure. So those are things you may come across, and I would hope you would take heed of them if and when you do see them. Now, another super simple way for you to stay safe when you're interacting online and signing up for web pages is to create a strong password. You may think, well, it's a password, no one's going to know it if I don't tell it to them, but that is just not always the case. There are people and hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of computers whose sole purpose is to find out what your password is to those really important sites. This is for a variety of purposes, like getting banking or credit card information or getting onto a website where you bought something. If someone guessed my Amazon login information, they would have access to pretty much all of my, cards that I pay for things with. So very important to create a strong password. So here are some of those tips. So never use personal information when you're creating a password. We'll get into a little bit more of what that is, but generally it's anything like your name or your street address or maybe where you work. Things that are easily found and connected to you are not good things to use for a password. Using a longer password helps to make it stronger. For every character you add to your password, it is exponentially more difficult for the algorithm being run by the computer or the person who's trying to get into your account to guess. So if an average password is required to be 8 or 10 characters long, go ahead and add an extra 2 characters if you can. Don't use the same password for every account. And this is something that I have struggled with in the past. But I have a way of kind of managing it that I think is pretty useful, and I'll share that with you all. Um, I try to use one password with some slight variation for work stuff, another one for like house and personal stuff, another one for school stuff, and another one for like social media. So I kind of know that if I'm logging into a social media account, say, it's going to be this password with 2 different special characters or something like that. It's going to be, in this genre or variety of password that I make. So you can use the same password for multiple things, but just having one password across all of your accounts is not recommended. You should also try to include numbers, symbols, and both uppercase and lowercase letters. Again, that just makes it that much more complex and difficult to figure out. In that same vein, try to avoid using words that can be found in the dictionary. So just using a word spelled as it is normally, library, for example, is going to be relatively easy to guess because these algorithms, of course, they recognize patterns. So if they've already figured out the first 4 letters of your password are LIBR, it's a easy, pretty easy guess to figure out ARY from there, right? There aren't too many words that start like that. So avoid using words that can be found in the dictionary. Random passwords are actually the strongest ones. So by random, I mean they make no sense. They mean nothing to anybody. There's no meaning ascribed to them whatsoever. It's just a random mix of characters and symbols. Password managers can help you remember, especially those random passwords, and some of them can even help you generate them. If you use a password manager, they can help you generate like a 20 character long random password full of symbols that you probably can't necessarily remember just off the top of your head, but they will also help you remember them. Then you have to remember the password for your password manager, which is the whole other situation. But they are very useful tools that if you're interested in, if you have a lot of accounts, if you have a lot of passwords, that might be worth looking into. So again, using a strong password is the easiest thing you can do to stay safe online because your password will be less likely to be compromised. And I do have some examples here for you. So weak passwords here, Rollo's mom 123 exclamation point. It does have uppercase and lowercase. It does have numbers and symbols, but there's a word commonly found in the dictionary, has some personal information. That's my dog's name. And those numbers are sequential. And I didn't mention this on the previous slide, but if you're going to use numbers, they shouldn't be sequential numbers because those are also extremely easy to guess and recognize patterns in. Dog lover 91, again, two words that are commonly found in the dictionary. 91 is my birth year, which is personal information. Don't necessarily want to use that either. And the weakest password of the bunch, my last name and pass. And this was pretty common. I know my family did it when we first got like Wi-Fi internet. We just made it, our last name internet, which was not a good password for our internet access. So those are very weak passwords, but they can be made stronger. So I don't mean to, say anything bad if your passwords look like this. It's not super likely that it will be compromised just because it looks like this, but there are ways to make it stronger, even if you are connected to the password Rollo's mom 123, right? So for example, here we have capital R for parentheses, 10S, pound sign, capital M, 0M. So it kind of still looks like Rollo's mom, but what we've done, and it is a really easy way to make passwords more secure, is to switch out some of the letters for numbers that kind of look like them and symbols that kind of look like them. So 4 can commonly be used for A, 1 can commonly be used for L, 0s for O's, of course, 3s for E's, 5s for S's. So you can kind of make it look super random without taking away the meaning it may have to you. Okay. All right. Now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about online shopping specifically. Here are a couple of tips that I try to use when I'm online shopping. So the first one is to shop from home when you can. Now, I know that not everyone has access to the internet at home or access to a device that's capable of connecting to the internet. But if you do need to shop online, I recommend you do it from home when you can. If you don't have that access, I recommend doing it from a place like the library that has securities in place to protect our patrons' privacy. Of course, it's very important to us that our patrons are able to go about their business that they need to from our computers. So we go above and beyond the average public Wi-Fi access point to protect that information. Whereas if you're just at your local McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever, they're not necessarily bound to go above and beyond for you all in that same sense of, security that we are. And also, just as an aside, if you are interested in checking out a hotspot or a Chromebook from the Milwaukee Public Library to bring some internet into your home, you feel absolutely free to do that and stop by your local branch to check out those. Moving on to number 2. Again, when you're online shopping, you're going to want to look for that HTTPS or the lock symbol to show you that the place you are entering your personal information into is secure. You also should consider researching the company or seller, especially if you've never used them before, if they're less well known. If you're buying online from Target, of course, Target's Target or Walmart's Walmart, whatever the case may be. But if you're buying something from eBay or a small shop online that you've never worked with before, definitely search that for reviews of their company to make sure that they're reputable. There have been cases where people have, thought they found a really good deal on a beautiful antique chair, and they've sent the shop the money, and it turns out that they were buying a doll chair. So it's important because you would learn about those hopefully by finding reviews of that company. Also, you want to use secure payment methods, so a credit card or PayPal, something that's kind of double insured. Things like checks or, sending Venmo or things through the mail, things like that are not great payment methods because once they have the money, if they cash the check or, they have the money in their account, there's less you can do than if it's a credit card payment or whatever the case may be. So use those secure payment methods when they're available to you. And keep your purchase records until you have that item in your possession and you are, pleased with the item, hopefully. It doesn't have to be physically like a printed receipt or files or anything like that. You can keep a screenshot of the receipt saved in your computer, or you can keep the, purchase order in your email, whatever the case may be. Just have something that shows proof of purchase until you are happy and satisfied with the item. And then finally, of course, trust your instincts. If a deal is too good to be true, like in the antique chair scenario, if you know the chair is normally $5,000 and you're able to find it for $500 and it looks like it's in pristine condition, that's something to be concerned about, right? Because it's not just the deal of all deals, it's probably something going on that is not great. All right. Now we'll move on to talking a little bit about online tracking and how that affects your privacy. So of course it wouldn't be an internet safety presentation if we didn't talk a little bit about cookies and what they're about. They're really nothing to be concerned about, but I just want to bring them up because I feel like a lot of people are getting a little bit concerned when every single website they visit says that downloading something onto their computer and they have to click yes, accept, or no, don't accept. For almost every website has some cookies that they utilize. So I will do my best to explain to you in brief what they're about, but I actually have a video that will do a much better job explaining than I ever could. So I will share that with you as well. So essentially, cookies are small pieces of data that create an invisible record of everything you click on and interact with on the internet. Most websites save this data, the cookies, and use them for their own purposes. And this type of tracking, most importantly, does not pose a serious risk to your online security. I'm going to go ahead and play this video for you all.
Cookies on the internet. But what exactly is a cookie? When cookies were invented, they basically were little documents containing helpful information about you and your preferences. For instance, imagine selecting a certain language for a website you'd visit. You tell the website, hey, I'd like to view your website in, say, English. The website would then save that information to a little document, a cookie, on your computer. The next time you'd visit that website, it would be able to read the cookie it saved earlier. That way, the website could remember your language and let you view the website in English without you having to select your language again. Pretty handy, huh? But cookies are not limited to remembering just your language. In fact, a cookie can contain pretty much any kind of information. It can contain the time you visited a website, or it can contain the items you added to your shopping basket. It can even contain all the links you clicked on a certain website, much like leaving a breadcrumb trail on the internet. A cookie can only contain so much text, but apart from its size, the possibilities are endless. What exactly is saved to a cookie is up to the creator of the website you are visiting. Now, contrary to the stuff a cookie can contain, there are limits to who can read your cookies. Imagine you first visit the website we talked about earlier. and you tell that website that your language is English. This is then saved to a cookie on your computer. If you'd visit a different website later, the latter wouldn't be able to read the cookie from the first website. In other words, only the same website that saves information to a cookie can access it. Since the beginning of cookies, the popularity of these clever little helpers exploded, and they gradually evolved into a more complex, yet essential part of the internet. During their evolution, the amount of data cookies contain started to grow. At first, they'd contain just a few preferences, like your language, and maybe your preferred layout for a website. But soon, developers realized that the more information they could store about you, the better they could suit your needs. Cookies started containing more and more data, and eventually started pushing their size limitations. Subsequently, developers came up with a clever workaround. What if they would simply store a unique ID in a cookie on your computer and save the rest of the data in their own system? That way, they could save unlimited amounts of data. The cookie would simply serve as an identifier for your computer, much like a dog tag by which the website can recognize you and look up your data in its own system. This was the first leap towards so-called third-party cookies. As mentioned, only the same website that saved data to a cookie can access it later. But one website can actually contain bits of another website. These bits and pieces of other websites, embedded in the website you're visiting, are actually able to access cookies they saved to your computer earlier. Imagine visiting a news website. Apart from news articles, many news websites contain a couple of ads. These ads are in most cases bits of other websites embedded into the news website. Now, the news website you're looking at may not have saved any cookies to your computer and thus know nothing about you. But where do the ads come from? It's not unlikely that the ads on the news website are embedded from the same website as the ads on another website you visited earlier. In fact, you may visit dozens of websites with ads which are all embedded from the same website. So what does this mean? This means that if the website the ads come from has saved a cookie to your computer earlier, it can identify you and save information about you through other websites. So while you're reading that news website, shopping for new shoes, looking up cures for a headache, or reading the latest gossip, the ads on those websites can identify you, look up your information in their own system, and dynamically show ads that you're most likely to be interested in, while simultaneously saving information about what you're doing online. So is this a bad thing? Are cookies dangerous? That depends, really. It is up to the creators of a website to determine what information they do and do not store, and more importantly, what they use that information for. Cookies are just a tool, just like a hammer or a saw. They can be used for bad things, but they are intended to be used for good things. The responsibility lies with the people putting them to use. Cookies in a nutshell. To read more on digital transparency, go to www.adversitement.com.
All right. So I hope that kind of, demystified cookies for you a little bit. Like the video said, they are truly tools to help enhance your experience, um, and not necessarily anything to kind of detract from it. So now we'll move on to talking about account tracking, which is where your activities are specifically associated with your presence on a particular website or service, unlike cookies. And to be clear, this information, again, isn't intended to be used for malicious purposes, even though they are intricately tracking your activities. I'm personally just of the mind that, an informed consumer has the ability to make better decisions about what they allow to be tracked. So there are two big sort of companies that do a lot of tracking on the internet. They're two huge companies, so Google and Facebook. So we'll talk about those two specifically today. So Google does pretty intricately track your web and app activity, specifically if you have a Google account, specifically if you use Google Chrome for your browsing. If you download any apps on, your Android devices, or onto the Chrome browser itself. Of course, they know that information. And of course, they know the sites you visit and your history as well. And they also know your location history, right? So if you log in to your Google account here in Milwaukee, and then you go on vacation and you log in, in the hotel in Charleston, South Carolina, they're going to recognize that you've been those two places, and it's probably going to mark the Charleston login as odd and make you verify that you are who you say you are, which we'll talk more about on some upcoming slides. But they know where you are, and they know where you've been. Oops. YouTube history. They also track your YouTube history. Google owns YouTube, so of course they know the videos you've watched, the videos you've posted, what you've liked, the comments you've made, things of that nature. And along the same location history vein, of course, there is geolocation attached to the Google Photos platform of Google. I visited the Burna Botanical Gardens a few weeks ago, and this isn't just limited to Google. Pretty much all phones, unless you turn off location services entirely, geolocate all your photos. When I went to the Botanical Gardens, it says all those photos were taken in Hales Corners, Wisconsin. I didn't put that in there. That's just in the metadata of the photo. And I could turn this off if I wanted to, but it's just important to know that that is there. And of course, this can be used to your benefit as well. And Google tracks a lot more. But I just want you to know that specifically, unless you turn this stuff off, Google is just tracking a lot of your information because it's of benefit to them. But I am going to actually show you how to access your Google account settings so you can turn this stuff off. And I want to show you what Google thinks of me from all the information they've gathered from my account. So I'm going to pop back into my browser here. And you can access your Google account on Google Chrome just by clicking on your profile picture and going down to manage your Google account. So here is a good place to check out if you have any security recommendations or do the privacy checkup. If you want to learn more about either of these things and you use Google Chrome for browsing, those are good places to go. But we're going to go to manage data and privacy right now. And then scroll down. So here we can see what history settings my Google account is tracking on me. So we have web and app activity is on, location history is paused, YouTube history is on. But of course you can see and delete your history at any time. So you do maintain control over this information. It's your information. You can do with it as you would please. We're going to go down to ad settings and just, this is what Google thinks of me. It's kind of funny to see what Google thinks of you. So I do recommend checking this out if you're a Google user. And just scrolling on down, they think a lot of things about me. These are all points of interest or ways they can sell me things or get me to engage. Because they're all things at times I've clicked on something related to business news or coffee and tea, so on and so forth. Just a bunch of random stuff I don't even remember searching, but is more or less true. So it's kind of interesting to go and see what the Google algorithm thinks of you as a person. All right, let's hop back into the presentation and talk about Facebook. So if you want to use Facebook, you are giving it permission to log your activity on that site by default. So where you check into on Facebook, the groups you join, who you interact with, posts you make, things like that. And this data is used, to serve up advertising. Pretty much all of Facebook's data is about advertising. Pretty much all of the data trail that you leave as you go through the internet is all about advertising, because that's how, a lot of these platforms make money. Facebook also owns Instagram and WhatsApp, so it will utilize your data from those as well. But more than that, unless you disable it, Facebook tracks what's called off Facebook activity as well. And I'm sure many of you have noticed that if you start shopping or looking around for baby items for a friend or family member's shower or something like that, you're more than likely to see ads start coming up on your social media that are like, you're like, why? How do they know? I was just looking at strollers. I don't actually have a kid or something like that. That happens a lot, but you can turn off the Facebook activity monitoring. Facebook has partnerships with a whole host of marketing firms and ad networks so that activities on those other sites can be combined into their profile of you as a Facebook user. And also, when you're logging into third-party services with your Facebook account, with your Google account, I know it's so convenient to just log in with like one click instead of having to create a whole new account for something. But that gives Google or Facebook or whoever you're using to log in access to that data as well. So just things to be aware of. As far as social media privacy goes specifically, of course, it's fundamentally more open and social than traditional communication tools like letters and phone calls and even email. The easiest thing to do is just think before you share things over social media. If you would be embarrassed or unhappy or anything of that nature, if someone saw it, you might want to think again about posting it, of course. Every social media network does have privacy settings to control who you share things with. So if that is important to you, definitely take it upon yourself to learn more about them. We will talk about this a lot more next month, so stay tuned for that. And quickly before we go, we're just going to talk about updates and verification and how important those two things are. So you may need to update your software and mobile applications pretty regularly, but the key here is to always make sure that they are coming from a trusted source. So if you just get a pop-up when you visit a website or click on a link that says kind of really excited using lots of exclamation points or something like that, even if they, says click here now to update your Adobe. Don't click there now, first of all. Instead, on your computer, open up that software. And if it needs an update, it'll probably prompt you to get one from the software itself. Or you can Google the software's name and the phrase latest update and get the update from that official source. And of course, before you download anything on the internet, you're going to want to check the security icon and you're going to want to make sure their certificates are valid and that it is a secure connection. And then on your phone, it's a little harder to download malware on a phone, but it can be done. So you just want to check in on your app store and look for the updates there or the Play Store, and you can see what needs to be updated. And then we'll talk about verification just briefly. Setting up appropriate verification is one way to make sure that you maintain control over your important accounts, be that social media or online banking or your online tax filing account, whatever the case may be. Generally, websites will use one of these, maybe a combination. of emailing your registered email address a link that you need to click on, or texting your phone number, a code that you need to input, or even giving you an actual phone call and giving you a code or some information you need to provide to prove that you're you. Because instead of just having one point of contact proving you're you, like your very strong password that you have now, you have another one that is your phone is with you, for example, or that you have access to another account that belongs to the owner of, the account you're trying to log into. Occasionally, on some sites like Facebook, they'll ask you to do more complex things to verify, like verify the people you're friends with or select comments you've made in the past. And on more like government official type sites, they'll ask you things like addresses you've been associated with in the past, family members, things like that. So all of these reasons I'm giving you are why it's super important to keep your most important information, especially your email and your phone number, up to date with those accounts that are really important to you. If you have to, say, rush to the library to print out boarding passes right before your flight, before traveling, but your email doesn't recognize the library's computer, so it asks you to verify your identity by texting a phone number that you haven't had in years, and you can't get what you need printed out, you might end up quite upset with the librarian when there's not a whole lot we can do to help with that situation. So please, if you have changed phone numbers in the last couple of years, just make sure, it's up to date with your email and your other websites and accounts that you like to use. That story totally isn't from personal opinion or personal experience, by the way, just so you know. And with that, I think I've given you all the tips I have, maybe, to staying safe as possible online. Are there any questions?
Yeah, there's a couple in the chat. Gail would like to know, where do you find password managers?
So you can, this is going to sound a little lame, but you can definitely Google password manager. But if you use a browser like Mozilla Firefox or Google Chrome, they actually have built-in password managers that kind of save and aggregate all your passwords. You can even like pull them up and look at them if you need to, just from knowing the password to your computer and your Google account. So it depends on kind of what, how much security you need. You can definitely pay for a password manager that may have some additional features like identity theft protection, where they're constantly monitoring and making sure your information isn't getting out there on the internet. But yeah, they're just little pieces of software that help you remember your passwords on all your devices. Yeah, I couldn't recommend one because I generally just use the Google Passwords Manager myself. It is a lifesaver.
That is also one that I use all the time. Thanks, Google. All right, and Maureen would like to know, she says on Walmart shopping, you see what you can buy in Walmart, the store, but there's also things that will be mailed to you from some other company. Is this legitimate?
Great question, Maureen. So I'd say for the most part, yes, there's a lot of third-party sellers that are trying to sell their items to you through Walmart. But the key with that is Walmart is most likely, I don't shop from Walmart online too often, but they probably will guarantee your purchase, but they may not guarantee the quality. It may not be the exact same item you would expect to find in the store itself, but that could just be because, for example, Walmart doesn't have this particular item you're looking for in their fulfillment center ready to be shipped out to you. So there's a whole host of reasons. Generally, yes, it is legit. But again, if you find the name of that store, I'd recommend just doing a little searchy and looking for reviews about that company to see if they've had just a whole host of bad reviews about quality or customer service or whatever the case may be. Great question.
All right. And then Gail would also like to know, in your opinion, how often should you change a password?
So I think the actual correct answer is every 90 days. I think that's what IT people would recommend, but me personally, I don't change the passwords. Maybe this is outing me and just asking for me to be hacked since this is going to be on the internet. But I don't change passwords unless places force me to, or I know they've been compromised. And the good thing about using a passwords manager like Google or LifeLock or Firefox, whatever the case may be, is that they are proactively, I should say, protecting your passwords, and that if they find your password has been published anywhere or that any of the sites you have saved a password for have been breached, they will let you know, and they kind of will make a big fuss of it using some of those warning signs and stuff like that, that, hey, you should change this password for this website because they just got hacked. So you should change this one. Other than that, I don't really change them. If you want to be extra super safe, I'd say every 90 days. And that's my personal opinion on that. Thanks for the question, Gail. Do you have any thoughts, Beth?
Yeah, that's basically what I do. I've noticed on Chrome as well now that when there's a big data breach, they'll let me know if a password has been compromised, and I'll try to change those. They'll also suggest strong passwords when I'm putting them in, and if it's something that I'm not logging in all the time, I will just use that strong password, even though it's 15 characters long, and there's no way I'm going to remember that. And honestly, I just make sure I know how to reset my passwords on everything more than I try to remember what the actual passwords are, because sometimes that's just easier for me to do.
Agreed.
Which seems weird, but hey, it is what it is.
That's where it's important to keep that verification information up to date.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So I have a list of sources that I'm including. And while I have you all, let's talk a little bit about the other cool Tech Tuesdays I have planned for you. So next month in Social Media September, we'll be going over Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. In October and November, we have another sub-series all about Google tools like Gmail and Google Drive. Those should be really great. And we also have a bunch of standalone presentations on digital media literacy, online money tips, the sharing economy, YouTube, image editing, and wearables. So if you're interested in any other virtual offerings from the library, I definitely encourage you to check out npl.org/calendar to see our schedule of events. We have a lot of amazing programs coming up. I know some of you will be interested in them. But other than that, that's all I have for you today. I thank you so much for joining me for the first Technology Tuesdays. I'm really happy to see some familiar names. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.
Everyone, see you next time.